Hello and welcome to Africa Today. I am Mike Okwache. With climate change, civil war, economic recession and terrorism all combining to threaten human existence, more people are on the move than ever in history, with Europe as a major destination. Now, according to Frontex, about 125,000 migrants from Africa have entered Europe in the past 18 months, including 52,000 Eritreans, 16,000 Nigerians, 6,500 Sudanese, 14,000 Somalians, and 35,000 who could not be identified. And the recent Valletta summit in Malta makes it the sixth time this year that the European Union have tried to address the growing concerns of migration in the region. So we asked, what are your thoughts on the $2 billion fund being offered by the EU to curb irregular migration from Africa? You can join the conversation and share your thought with us on Twitter at TVC News_Africa. A report to launch the program and Africa Today will continue. Welcome on board.
Nigeria alone accounts for more than 7,000 illegal migrants, coming behind countries like Syria and Afghanistan, with about 54,000 and 31,000 migrants respectively. It is on record that most of the migrations come from the West, Central and the Horn of Africa. And the European Union says the inflow of these migrants into its territory gives cause for concern. The Valletta summit is part of the efforts put in place to bring the EU and African countries together towards formulating policies that will tackle the menace of illegal migrants.
When we consulted with lots of people in Africa, they said to us, well, you've decided to take these initiatives on your own, but we should actually all sit together and talk about what's happening. And I think this is the reason why it was decided to have the Valletta summit, to try and address some of those key issues that we're facing at the moment, and to look at the issues of migration, not as an issue where somebody says, look, this is your problem, this is Europe's problem, but to see it as a mutual problem, as a shared problem. You know, there are many reasons why migration is taking place. One of the reasons is because of the large income differences that exist between Europe and Africa. Another reason is the political and security situation in African countries. And maybe a third reason is the effect of desertification and the way that that's affected people's lives.
With war, human rights violations, economic and political instability, the number of illegal migrants is on the rise. The EU says it remains committed to ensuring that it plays an important role in addressing the global challenges posed by migration by helping to improve the living conditions of affected countries.
We have, within the European Union, we have what's called the Common Security and Defence Policy that has different missions in parts of Africa, including in Mali and including in Niger, where they try and address the issues of security from a European Union perspective in collaboration with those countries. We also have the European Union member states that are looking at those security issues, and they have elements, whether it's a military cooperation or police cooperation or whatever. We have some aspects of work that we do in this area as well.
The summit hopes to address the root causes of migration, establishing and organizing legal migration channels, enhancing the protection of migrants and asylum seekers, tackling exploitation and trafficking of migrants, and also improving the cooperation of return and readmission in these countries.
Glad to have you on Africa Today. Now, a nearly $2 billion African Trust Fund was recently unveiled at a two-day summit at EU and African leaders in Malta to combat poverty, slow down migration and speed up repatriation programs. Although only $118 million was raised by the end of the meeting, this new fund is an addition to the $21 billion annually donated to Africa by the EU states. Joining me on Africa Today, I have Cyril Abako, researcher and analyst with us here in the studio. Cyril, welcome to Africa Today.
Thank you, Mike. I'm
nice
glad
to see you.
Here. Yeah.
And on Skype, I have Dr. Sharif Alabi, consultant for the African Development Bank, is joining us from the UK. Dr. Alabi, it's good to see you on Africa Today.
Thank you, Mike.
All right.
Pleasure.
Okay, and on phone, I have Itai Viriri, spokesperson of the International Organization for Migration. He'll be joining us from Italy, and we have him as we get along. Now, Cyril, let's start with you here. Why has it become so difficult to curb the issues of migration? Since a year ago, or a little more than a year ago, the issues of migration has been on the news, and there seem not to be an end in sight.
Well, I would like to enunciate two major reasons. The first being that I think the attempt to curb migration has not been very perfect. Okay. Not that it should be perfect, but I think hasn't got as close as it should be.
So it's not effective?
Yes, to being a proper solution. Okay. That's one. And then the motive again is another thing. Let's even begin with the conference in Malta, in Valletta, Malta, that took place about last week. You would notice that, and this is what participants were also saying, that because Europe is affected, they convoked this conference and then presented a European agenda. You know, I mean, for me, I think there should have been a bit more of mutual...
And inclusive.
Yes.
Okay.
It wasn't as inclusive as it should be. And this brings to mind a kind of analogy where you're a prosperous neighbor of mine and I'm also your neighbor. If I'm dying of hunger with my children, as far as we don't come to your farm to steal, perhaps you won't feel affected. But you know, when we begin to steal from your farms, yes, steal your clothing, then you feel affected. So you know, you look at it that even from this conference, Europe's national self-interest is still what is actually driving this particular solution seeking or solution finding. Okay. So and perhaps this is so because you know, the rapport, the relationship that Africa has had with Europe has been basically, I mean, historically speaking, has been one of colonizer or colonialist.
The colonized and the colonizer.
and the colonized. So there has been this master-servant talking to kind of thing. Right. We haven't really come to a point where we say, look, what affects Africa affects Europe. I know in the course of the show we are going to be discussing quite a number of things, but the fundamental lack that the average African on the street suffers is because his leaders have stolen funds. These funds are stashed in banks in Europe. That's one. Then even African resources, natural resources, end up finding a way where in Europe as well. So if the African feels disaffected, he knows that what he's looking for that has left his country is in Europe. He does not have a choice than to find his way. They're braving the desert, braving the weather, braving everything it will take. He has to find his way there.
Okay. Oh, all right. Let's get to. I have Dr. Sheriff Alabi with me now on Skype. Doctor, what is unique about Europe that's making the world want to go there? That's responsible for the push and the pull factor with the migrants.
I suppose we could look at it geographically. Europe's proximity to Africa in that sense, in comparison to the Americas, for example, North America in particular. So it's closer home to Africa. Historically, we also look at it from that perspective. We were at one point largely colonized by Europe. So we still have that historical tie in a sense. And I think the third point is probably because there is this belief that the grass is always greener on the other side. So Africans, by and large, still have this belief that to go to Europe will be to make it in life. And the perception that probably the streets of Europe, whichever city, whether from Rome or to London to Paris, is laden with gold. Unfortunately, it's not true. And no matter how you can that.
All right, we seem to have.
That it is really not worth the risk. Okay. And it's only when
all right, we seem to be having a distortion there, Dr. Alabi. We can't really hear you clearly. We'll certainly rectify that and then put you back on. Now, you were talking about it seemed like Europe was fronting their own agenda, as the case may be. Now, on the other hand, the African leaders were also at the summit. What was their own position, and how effective would their own position also be in this?
From what we were able to gather, you know, the African delegation or Africa's position came into play late into the conference. But it is good that at least it came in. Now, at the time the EU announced the $2 billion fund, it was a good one to see Senegal's president come up to say, look, this fund that you have actually earmarked isn't going to go anywhere. And Mike, you know that European countries donating to the fund is also an issue. They were not willing to donate. I mean, which actually pushed Scholes, one of their own delegates, to actually say that, look, when it came to the time we needed to save banks, we were donating billions. Now it has come to saving lives, and we're not doing as much as we should do, which means that, stricto sensu, there's a feeling that Europe is more interested in the symptom than in the cause.
Okay.
On paper, we have issues like tackling unemployment, creating infrastructure, but when what you're doing is not commensurate with what you're saying, there's a lacuna, and that lacuna explains your motive. That's my point of departure.
Okay, we'll come back to this. Now, this is Africa Today. We are looking at the European Union's effort to tackle irregular migration from Africa. We'll go on a break, and Africa Today will continue. Stay with us. Okay. All right. Hello, Dr. Sharif. Can you hear me now?
I can hear you. It sounded probably a little bit poor.
Okay.
But I can hear you.
Exactly. We had a distortion earlier on, so we're coming to you now.
Right.
Yeah, the Skype questions. Okay. After the intro. Welcome back to Africa Today. Now, a number of African leaders have been critical of the EU fund, wanting investment ahead of aid and the return of billions of dollars lost through illicit financial flow and tax avoidance by multinational companies who have their origins in Europe in general. Now, I still have with me on Skype Dr. Sheriff Alabi with me. Now, Dr. Sheriff, now, about $2 billion have been pledged by the EU countries for Africa. Now, if this monies are remitted in true terms as promised, how would it translate to curbing migration?
I don't believe it will. For the simple reason that the fund being set aside, I actually don't think that anyone has thought more properly about how it's going to be utilized. And I think for now, what we have is just commitment. There isn't actually commitment yet. The African fund is set 1.6 billion EU, of which the UK is, what I mean, the only country that still has commitment. Really can't really to addressing the symptoms of the problem, and I think probably maybe
We seem to have we're still having some distortion with your voice there, with your link there, Dr. Alabi. We'll certainly try to rectify that and come back. Now, Cyril, the issue of monies being provided. Now, African leaders, from comments we've heard from some of the leaders generally, they're talking about history, 10 years, 5 years, 50 years, 20 years back, 30 years, 3 decades ago, where so much money, you've just mentioned it, so much money leave Africa and then they find their way to European banks, and they are not saying, don't bring this money, don't bring this money. They accept the money and keep. And then by the time investigations are going on, it takes so much in fact, there are some of the monies from Africa since 2-3 decades ago, the processes are still on to repatriate the funds and they're not being returned, as the case may be. Now, if African leaders are generally skeptical or critical, let me say, about this fund,